Since discovering financial independence, my focus has been on wealth building, choosing the right accounts, investing wisely, and cutting expenses to save more. But now that I'm approaching my FIRE number, a new question has emerged. What happens after I reach financial independence? On one hand, there's the technical side. What's the best way to go about withdrawing from my nest egg? This is something I hadn't given much thought to until now. But beyond the finances, the bigger question is, what changes in life? Will I scrutinize every expense? Do I worry about major market news? And most importantly, how do I want to spend my time? I need some guidance, and I'm guessing you do too. So I asked my friend Jeremy Schneider to come demystify life after reaching financial independence. Jeremy Schneider is the creator of the popular Instagram account Personal Finance Club. He is also the co-founder of Nectarine, a marketplace for advice-only financial advisors. Before launching Personal Finance Club and Nectarine, Jeremy built and sold a technology company for $5 million, achieving financial independence in the process. This sum of cash catapulted him into financial independence. He had to answer some important questions quickly, and in this episode, he shares what he learned from that experience. So, whether you're nearing your FIRE number or simply curious what life looks like after financial independence, this is the episode for you. I hope you enjoy my conversation with the man trying to bring light on the financial advising industry, Jeremy Schneider. You know those moments where you think, I wish I would have learned this in school? Those are the topics that we love to talk about. Join me each week as I interview experts sharing their strategies for solving problems that us young adults will face throughout our 20s and 30s. So what are you waiting for? If you want new episodes about adulting advice every Monday, hit that follow button. Well, Jeremy, let's get into today's conversation. Glad to have you back on the show again. And if people are looking to deep dive into your backstory, they can go check out episode 57, which was 101 episodes ago. So it's been way too long since you've been back on The Struggle is Real. In that conversation, we talked about the two-step plan to retire in 15 years. Today, I want to talk about the flip side of that, kind of what happens after you reach FIRE. And you reached FIRE after selling your software company for $5 million. And I guess you officially retired at 36, although that sale happened when you were 34. Let's talk kind of tactical, practical, factual of all things kind of post-FI, and would love maybe to open up with the tactical piece. Can you walk us through maybe your own personal strategy or some other phases on how you would actually be taking money out of your nest eggs?
This is one of these things that feels very confusing to people when you've never done it. And then as soon as you're in that world, it's like, okay, whatever. And there might be some slightly tactical things, but there's kind of like a progression of where you get money from. So let's say you quit your job like I did at 36 years old. And then the next month rent comes due and you're like, okay, where do you get this money? The first place you go for the money is your checking account. Any cash you have sitting there in obviously is normal, regular old account, you pay from there. If there's no money there, then you can go to the dividends from your taxable account. And so this might be a little bit strategic, but normally when I'm talking to people about investing, I say, hey, always have dividends reinvesting. And that means when investments you own, stocks, index funds, whatever, pay the dividends out, instead of letting that cash accumulate, you are automatically buying more of the same fund. That's called reinvesting dividends. But once you are no longer in the adding to investments phase, and that arrow kind of goes the other way, now you're taking money out to live, that becomes after this cash that's already sitting in your accounts, that becomes the next best option, because that's all going to get taxed either way. And I'm talking about, again, this is a regular old taxable brokerage account. We're not yet to the tax advantage accounts like 401k, IRA, things like that. But that's going to get taxed no matter what. It's cash. And so you're basically just a transfer away from it being in your checking account. And dividends these days, if you own index funds, are about 2% of the value. And so if you're living on the 4% rule, that there alone might be, depending on what type of account you have, that might be as much as half of your annual income. And so for me, my taxable dividends each year are about $50,000. When I am doing my living expenses, I pop my head into my Fidelity brokerage account and I just see how much cash is sitting there. And I do transfer, fund brokerage, to cash management or checking. Then I spend that money as I do anywhere else, right?
And I guess you have layered complexity too, because you still run a business and you're generating income from your business. So I'm guessing it's business income first, dividends out of the brokerage account second, or is there anywhere else that you take money from outside of, I guess, the checking account that's kind of sitting with money in it?
Yeah, that's a good point, because a lot of people also think that this happens in the vacuum. They're like, I'm going to quit my job and then everything is going to be this like frictionless vacuum of a world in physics and it's going to go forward indefinitely. But the reality is we all have shit in our lives. I got an inheritance. I got a birthday gift. I sold a property. I got this. I paid for this, And so everyone's like, do you take 1/12 every month? Or do you I'm like, no, just because stuff comes up. Like, for example, I moved 2 weeks ago and I'm closing and I'm selling my old house and I'm closing on Monday. And so I'm going to have an influx of like $1.1 million of cash. I'm probably just going to shave off 0.1 million, also known as 100,000, and then just throw that into my cash account. And so I don't need cash for another year or two, right? And then take the other million and pay down the like massive mortgage I just signed up for. And so, there's stuff like that, and that's going to go on in all of our lives that is going to disrupt this like perfect surgical like layering or whatever. For me, like you said, I've got business income. And so I wasn't even mentioning that here because like if we're living in this frictionless vacuum where there's no income, then you start working through the assets or whatever. But for me, of course, like the little bits of income I have, I count that. But yeah, my income's weird because it's like I own businesses. And so sometimes I just leave all that cash in the business or whatever. Mm-hmm. And not necessarily, it's not like necessarily a paycheck.
Makes sense. I've been doing that thought exercise a lot. And I think you have to really consider that if like, especially if you're Coast-fi or you're got a Barista-fi, like you don't just like all of a sudden decide to leave your job and then just put up zeros in the income category every single year. Like you're probably going to accidentally run into money and or kind of strategically make some money because you're following a passion or a hobby of yours that might generate some income. So yeah, I've always found this thought exercise a little interesting because it's not like you put the money in the sequential order and then you're pretty much got to work backwards and take it out in that sequential order. Like there might be years where I'm guessing you don't pull out any money or liquidate any of your assets because business is doing well or you just didn't buy a whole lot or you sold your house, things like that. And there might be other years where you're like buying a house and you might have to like liquidate some assets in a little bit more of a degree.
Everything you said there is so true. First of all, the types of fire-minded people who find themselves in an early retirement situation are rarely the types of people who like unplug the W-2 paycheck and then never see a dollar of income again. It's like, they're like, you know what? I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to open up that coffee stand I've always dreamed of. And it's like, oh shit, this has turned into more income than my, main job used to be. Income usually finds its way to these types of people in my experience. And also, like you're saying, it's never the frictionless vacuum thing. It's like some years this, some years that. It's not 1/12 every single year. Like I bought a Tesla a couple of years. You know what I did? I went and sold a bunch of ITOT, transferred it over, and then paid for my car. And then some years, I've got some income and it ends up going the other way, right? But yeah, for sure, I think people are afraid of if they don't have that like clockwork income coming in, like what's going to happen. And, you can live off your assets.
Yeah. So do you just wait until a checking account gets below a certain number and then pull out, a certain amount of cash to kind of reinstate that number into your checking account? Or is it more just haphazard? You're like, oh shoot, my checking account's getting a little low. I should probably just sell some assets. Is there any strategy that you put behind when you liquidate or when you pull things over and out of brokerage account and into your checking account?
I'm a very like YNAB Excel focused guy. I like have folders of receipts, like digital folders of receipts. But still, like for this topic, it's kind of haphazard. Like I generally keep at least. And I got married a month and a half ago. And so we're kind of in the process of merging finances and joint accounts and things like that. And so these answers might be changing from single life to married life. But in single life, I basically always keep at least 10 grand in cash in the account. And then if it gets low, I'd top it off to 20 grand or whatever. But it was never more scientific than that, yeah.
Are you still maxing out 401ks, IRAs every year, kind of transferring money out of the taxable and getting it into the retirement accounts?
In my personal situation, most of my money is in a taxable account because I had a huge windfall selling my company and I had years of being poor before that. And so I basically have like 95% of my investment portfolio is in a taxable account. And so, yeah, I am doing everything I can to cram money into those taxable accounts every year, including I do a backdoor Roth IRA, and I do have actually a 401k. So I'm becoming less retired by the day, but I have a kind of a modest paycheck coming from Personal Finance Club. But we did set up a 401k for the three of us who work there. And so my paycheck, I max it out at 20,000 or what it is, $23,000 a year.
23, I think, yeah.
And my paycheck coming out of it after that is like very little because we don't and I also withhold a bunch of my tax. So I think I make like $1,000 a paycheck. So like $2,000 a month, which like if I was living in very frugally, not in Southern California, maybe you could survive on that. But the way I'm living now, I definitely can't. But basically, because my paycheck is so small, I'm still relying on the assets to live and then funneling money into the tax advantage accounts for tax savings.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you are becoming less and less retired by the day, but I would love to zoom back to 36-year-old Jeremy when you mentioned that you went through a period where every day was a Saturday. And I know you played a lot of like StarCraft 2 and beach volleyball and did some traveling. Do you feel like that time was necessary for you? You were grinding right out of college, building your business, eventually sold it at 34 and then worked for them for 2 more years. Did you need a period of time where you didn't do anything, or do you regret spending some of that time the way you did?
Definitely don't regret it. I often think I want to get back to more like that, especially as my marriage and family is growing. It needed to be a life lesson for me, which is I always thought that, and I think this is like a good message for people on the fire path. I always thought that there was like a race and a finish line. And the finish line is called financial independence. When you get there, you like throw your arms in the air and celebrate. And then you've won and you quit your job and you move to the beach and drink Mai Tais and then you're done. And so that's what I did. Like your insane deep research has noted, I was like playing video games for a year. I coached beach volleyball in Italy for 2 months, which technically was a job, but like basically like a dream vacation. I went to Australia for a month and a half, just like literally whatever I wanted to do, and it was great. And it sounds like the dream everyone has, like do whatever you want to do. Every day's a Saturday. But after doing that for like a year or a year and a half, I definitely felt like kind of empty. Like I felt like there was no purpose, no direction to my life. I always talk about like the dinner party. It's like if someone asks me like, what do you do at a dinner party? I'd be like, I'm unemployed. Everything you say sounds weird. You could say, I used to be a computer programmer, or I sold a company. It sounds kind of douchey. I'm retired sounds extremely douchey when you're in your 30s. I'm unemployed makes people, I used to say that a lot, and people would like instantly be like, oh, I'm so sorry. And then it's like, it's like the fastest, anything else you say elicits follow-up questions. But when you say unemployed, no one asks a single follow-up question. They don't want to dig in. They don't want to like discover the sadness. I mean, except for the fact that like, why are you unemployed? I'm like, I'm a multimillionaire and I travel and do whatever I want. But like, beneath those like weird answers was like a truth, which is like, I had no purpose in life. I was just like, the truth was like, oh, I sold a company a few years ago and I've done nothing. And maybe that's cool when you're 35, but like, when you're 70, is that what you want to tell people? Oh, tell me your life story. Like, oh, I worked really hard for 12 years and then I just basically was a piece of shit for 40 years. And not only like, is it not a story I want to tell, but it doesn't feel good. I feel, even today, I talked to my wife about this. I'm like, I feel bad if I'm not getting something done. Like I feel really bad at work if I'm like, boom, if I can like, move this like Mark IV and be like, look how far I dragged this rock today. You can see the path behind it. Or if the rock is right where it was yesterday, it's like, oh, I just feel bad. So that was kind of a necessary education for me. There's a saying about financial dependence, which is the reward for financial dependence is an existential crisis, because we all think we're on this race to the finish. And then you get to the finish and you just assume it's like rainbows and pots of golds and whatever is at the finish line. But then you realize that like life just starts ticking away and you're like, wait, what's the struggle now? We're on the struggle is real, but you're like, if there is no struggle now, then what's real? What's real? Yes. And so, yeah, that was important to me. There's parts of it super fun. So I have no regrets about like taking that year or whatever, but also I need to learn that like there needs to be a little bit of, I hate this like corporate speak word, but there needs to be a little bit of balance and be like, hey, like I think some work is really good for me, good for the world, increases happiness, but also try to figure out how to like still have a lot of those like month and a halves in Australia when you can get away with it.
Yeah, we chatted with Jordan Grummett, Doc G, last episode, and we talked a ton about purpose. And of course, he debunked a lot of the concept around finding your purpose, and it's more so about creating it. I find that really fascinating because I think that's going to be some of my biggest struggle. I know you use the vocabulary, you lacked tension, like there wasn't tension in your life, and I really resonated with that. But I also find I'm going to probably struggle with like, how do I add tension to my life, but also how do I relax and give myself time and space for all the other important things outside of work, which is, family and friends and hobbies and health. I'm currently kind of struggling through that right now, trying to find the right balance. And I'm starting to figure out that there's probably no playbook for it. Like I think some of it might just be a gut feeling. Some of it might be a season of life for you. Maybe something has you really excited that is classified as work and you love spending 8, 10, 12 hours on that every single day. While other times you might want to be like, man, I'm tired and I want to go do some traveling, or I want to explore this new hobby. Do I have that right? Or kind of how do you think through the balance between work and, let's just call it play for simplicity's sake?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I actually love the word tension. That is the word I usually use, and purpose is more Doc G's word, so I shouldn't be borrowing it so much. But yeah, I feel like when most people, I think there's this inherent tension in your life, which is like, I need more money. In some cases of like poverty, it's like, I can't pay the lights bill. This is like an existential problem, and that's like stressful, terrible, like you need to solve that. But for many middle class people, it's like, I'd like a new car, I'd like the next vacation, I'd like the house upgrade, and you always feel this tension. And then for me, when that tension kind of disappeared, when I went from being like living on $36,000 a year salary to suddenly not having to work at all, the tension was gone, and that became a problem. And so, but kind of what you're saying, there's this seesaw of no tension means no purpose, means no like fulfillment, means no like drive or feeling of making progress and things like that add to your life. But tension is correlated with stress. In the extreme case, it's very stressful if you can't pay your lights bill. And so it's like, how do you balance those things? And the answer is, when you find out, please tell me, because I don't know, right? Like I think it is kind of like a seesaw, and I think most of us very easily seesaw to the stressful side because it's so easy to become stressed about money. Like even, me, I'm like kind of stressed about money right now. I'm in the middle of these two like very big $1 million and $2 million real estate transactions with like the homes I'm selling and buying, and the mortgage we signed up for. I've never had a mortgage in my life, and now I have one. And you seem to know a lot. You've done a very good job following my story, so you might not even know that I've even mentioned to anyone that like we signed up for a mortgage for this new house. And I'm like, how are we going to pay this mortgage? And like, we're going to pay most of it with the proceeds from the old house. But so it's very easy to introduce money tension to your life. The goal should be try to like reduce as much money tension as possible, and then have a little bit of like passion tension about working on the thing that you like,
That's tough. And I see it with you with Nectarine, because I know you probably don't need to have a whole nother business under your belt, but I know you are very passionate about answering the question, like, where do I find a financial advisor that's really in my best interest? Creating so much content around personal finance that kind of naturally led you there. Did you think twice though about like, do I really want to add another company and kind of this whole pile of work? Or were you kind of gung-ho when you knew this was something you were really passionate and wanted to solve?
My mom is a very wise woman, and one of the smartest things she said to me is, Jeremy, it's much easier to get into something than it is to get out of something. And that's so true. Like, it's very easy to like sign up for a volunteer opportunity, but it's much harder to like, you're like, oh, now that I'm treasurer, it's very hard to get out of it, right?
Yes.
It's very easy to start dating someone. It's very easy to get married. Like, I just recently experienced how easy it is to get married. It takes about 30 minutes at the courthouse and a couple $100 and you're married. It's not very easy to get divorced, as many of us know. And it's very easy to start a business that has a bunch of asterisks next to it. Sure. Because like it's easy as a guy for me to say, but like the forms you fill out and stuff like that are easy to start a business. But I have 2 co-founders, and we have now a full-time employee and payroll and yada, yada, yada. And so like your question you asked was like a very good one, which was like, did you like get into this like thoughtfully? And the answer is probably not really, because I'm reckless and despite my mom's great advice, I don't always take it. But we were really passionate about this problem, and I was really excited about it, and I really wanted to do it. And, now I kind of do feel like as a retired person, I'm like running two businesses, which is, it's almost like two jobs. It's a lot, but I've seen the other side of that coin too. And so I am somewhat thinking about how I can simplify my life and reduce some of this work stress while still like doing the things I'm passionate about.
Especially after, I'm guessing, getting married and having a family kind of come through here as well, you're starting to realize, oh, if I spend all of this time here, I'm spending less time with this person. And I kind of feel that too. My girlfriend does a lot of traveling, and it's kind of one of those things where I just like got to jump on a plane and go hang out with her, or I'm not going to see her. And there are pieces or aspects of work that prevent me from doing that. So I'm once again trying to find the balance so I'm not always like regretting spending so much time working, but at the same time, I'm still really passionate about the things that I'm doing over here in the work category too. I don't envy you or anyone else that has this situation. I think it's a really challenging one.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's shift to money and kind of how you think about money kind of post-FI. Of course, you just talked a lot about your mortgages, and we're talking 7-figure transactions in that state. I think that would give a little bit of pause or space for someone to really be thinking about that decision. But are there decisions, is there a dollar threshold that you're like, doesn't bother me whatsoever. If I want it, then I go ahead and buy it? Or do you still think through most, if not all, of your purchases?
For some background on me, like I grew up in a very, very frugal family, I guess with a very especially frugal / cheap, however you want to define those words, dad. For example, as like a growing teenager, we'd go to McDonald's. I'd want like supersize, like the bigger fries or whatever. And it was like 50 cents, and he would say no for financial reasons. And I was like hungry. And I was like, so these like the kind of lessons that I saw grow up, which is like, it's not worth eating for 50 cents. And by the way, like the thought of feeding a growing teenager McDonald's, not that that's what I wanted. So I was asking for it.
Yeah.
So I'm not blaming my parents, but like, I wouldn't eat that now. I just very, very frugal stuff. And so like, that was like, and then my college years, I was like living like a college kid. Then, basically all my 20s, I was living on nothing. And so like my whole fiber of every formative year of my life is with these like extreme frugality situations. Not that extreme. I don't know. Whenever I say things, I feel like, I grew up in poverty. It's like, okay, I wasn't in poverty. I wasn't like food scarce or whatever. I definitely like was a fed child and a fed 20-year-old, but saw money as an extremely limited resource, and every penny must be treasured.
One of my favorite stories that you talk about is just the frustration around floss, and like for like how many years you were using like, I don't know, 6 inches of floss or something. And then all of a sudden you had that wake up moment where you're like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm mad. I don't want to floss every single day because it slips through my hands or it breaks or whatever. And you're at a point with the money that you have that you could probably buy a new container of floss for every day and still, sure, would it be a waste? Maybe, but like financially, it's something that you're capable of doing.
Yeah. If I bought, like, and this floss story you're telling, by the way, was like a year ago. So I'm 44 now. I was probably 43 when this dawned on me, and I had been a multimillionaire for 7 years or something, and I was still flossing with like this little like 6-inch piece of floss. And it dawned on me I was doing that for reasons of frugality. And yeah, I could buy a new pack of floss twice a day, every day for my life, and you wouldn't even be able to see it in my bank account. It's so many digits down from the top digit. You would never, it'd be lost in the interest transaction daily or whatever, but it just speaks to these behaviors that I still have, that I think that we all have. And so, I mean, to get to your question that you asked to kick things off, like, is there a threshold now? It's definitely getting better. The early days, right after I sold the company, I was like really I mean, like, I feel like the girls I dated back then, I kind of feel bad for, because they're like, wait, I'm dating this millionaire and he's like, we're still like having a picnic with $2 Chuck at the public park. I'm like, hey man, this is a good value. I mean, maybe it wasn't that bad, but now things like, for sure, grocery store, I was like one of the first ones. Like anything, if I'm in the grocery store, I used to like kill myself over trying to reduce my grocery budget. Now I'm like, any food is fine, especially in the grocery store, because like anything you buy in the grocery store is going to be at least half what you'd pay for it in a restaurant, if not, 25 or 10% of what you'd pay for in a restaurant. And so don't go nuts there, because you're probably saving money on restaurants. And then even restaurant food, like, no worries. Travel, I definitely basically just say yes to without worrying about, like I don't kill myself over flight costs and things like that. Because still buying a flight is like, I don't fly first class really ever, maybe other than a few times. And so still any first class or any flight is going to be like remarkably cheaper than first class. But yeah, I'm still like, still run the numbers. Like when we bought this house, I was like, oh, can we afford it? And there's still things, I still look at every price. If you're interviewing my wife now, she'd be like, yeah, he's still frugal. He lets me know about Amazon purchases, and I don't know. I was just like last night I was shopping for a little extension cord we need for my TV, and one was $22 and one was $17. I was like, oh, is it $5 better? So yeah, I still do those calculations.
I know one of your most recent posts, you did I think it was 2 weights, and like they were like $62 on Amazon or like $30 on OfferUp.
Dude, nothing gets by you, Justin. How do you know this? You're like I posted at like 4 p.m. yesterday. You missed nothing.
Is that also something that you would follow through with? I don't know if that was a fictitious story or based on reality for you, but would you go ahead and spend, let's just call it an hour to message the person, coordinate the details, drive, pick it up, come back, and have the weights to save, I think it was $37 if you're also negotiating $5 off, which was just a funny caveat to that whole story.
I mean, you shouldn't negotiate $5. I would say I did a lot more of that in my 20s. In my 20s, it was like buy everything on Craigslist, sell everything on Craigslist. Like my only cost of living was like rent and food, and all other like fixed goods could be bought and sold on Craigslist for like net neutral, essentially was my goal. Now I still do, the weights thing, I literally was just on scrolling through OfferUp looking for an example. But I happen to have a pair of 40-pound dumbbells in my garage right now that I bought on OfferUp 2 years ago when I was a millionaire, because I'm like, well, are used dumbbells any worse than new dumbbells? They're probably just as heavy, and I'm gonna save. And like, I guess I'm having trouble verbalizing right now because there's something about me that just speaks to the wastefulness of buying a brand new pair of dumbbells when you'll save money and like shipping and gas and blah, blah, blah. And someone else is trying to get rid of it. So I still do it. We're currently trying to buy a Peloton for my wife. We're buying that. And I'm like, why are we going to spend $1,200 on a Peloton when San Diego is full of like upper middle class ladies who have ridden it for 2 months and sick of it. It's collecting dust. We're going to clean it up. It's going to look brand new. And so, yeah, we still do that sometimes.
And that was also a multi-dimensional decision too. We're not truly talking $62 versus $30, but also you talked about the importance of reducing waste. And I think that's an important factor, especially as you get more money. It's maybe counterintuitive, but you can buy things that do create less waste, which is great. And the secondhand market is just flush with like amazing things out there if you spend an extra 10, 15 minutes just doing a quick search.
Totally. Yeah, it's like a little bit less convenient. It's amazing to have like just type in the words, click the button, and it shows up brand new from Amazon on your doorstep. Like that consumer experience is amazing. But the secondhand market, like you said, it's a little more work to sift through and decide, but then it's amazing too. Like they have like, the 40-pound dumbbells in my garage, like they're really nice. They're like probably a better brand than are on Amazon,
I have seen a lot of growth with you too. And one of my favorite interviews that I heard from you while I was prepping for you was your appearance on Rich Habits. And I remember Austin, the host, asked you about your decision to continue living in San Diego, essentially questioning why you live in such a high cost area and in a state where taxes are incredibly expensive. And I loved your response. And you pretty much just said, well, yeah, but I kind of think about it the opposite. And since I am FI, I should probably decide exactly where I want to live versus letting money decide where I live. And that was just like I think a big, maybe a growth moment for you, but definitely something like whenever I was doing some research on you and being like, wow, that was actually super thoughtful in the sense of like, yeah, I'm not going to actually have money dictate something so important to me as to where I live. Any thoughts that come from that?
That past Jeremy guy was right. Kind of thought his question was backwards because it's like, why don't you live in a lower cost area? I'm like, no, I'm rich so I can live exactly how I want to live. I'm not trying to like let my money just like drive my life. Like I want to use money to live my life, right? And so, yeah, I feel like a lot of people are like, hey, now that you're rich, aren't you going to go into some like tax shelter in Puerto Rico? Or like, I'm like, if I want to live in Puerto Rico, maybe, but like, I happen to think San Diego is the best place in the country to live. And so that's the benefit of being rich, is using it in that way. So yeah, I still fully stand behind that. It's expensive here, But that's what you like. That's the benefit of having money is you get to buy the things that you want, including like deciding where you live.
Yeah, another interesting thread that you guys talked about on that podcast was with Robert, the other co-host that was on that show. It seemed like you guys kind of agreed to disagree on this. He was making a case for active management. You were kind of making a case for low-cost index funds that aren't actively managed whatsoever. Is there any case that you actually can make for active management? Are there certain situations where that could play out well, or are you pretty much die hard and set that for 99%, maybe even 100% of people that low-cost index funds is the way to go?
I'm pretty die hard. I think every argument for active management just falls back on speculation and gambling. Mm-hmm. And everyone's got an explanation and an angle, but there's an opposite explanation and an opposite angle on the other side of that that's some other active managers using that's setting the price of the index. The only caveat I would say is not a true academic thesis as to why you'll outperform, but a psychological reason why you might want to do it for your own good. And so I have like what's called the 90-10 rule and say, hey, with 90% of your portfolio, buy and hold index funds. That's what the math says. That's what the statistics say. That's what the studies say. That's what the research says. That's what's going to be the most likely thing to make you the most rich. But with the 10%, hey, maybe everyone's wrong. Maybe you do. Maybe you are the king. Maybe you're the speculative god. Maybe you've got the edge. And so go nuts with your 10%. Pick stocks. Be active. Whatever. And I think not only does it like buy you your lotto ticket essentially, and be like, oh, I wish I would have taken that stock tip my Uncle Joe gave me at Thanksgiving, but it also kind of is like a release on that FOMO of being like, oh, if you hit it big, great. You've given yourself permission to play with the 10%. And I heard what described once like, if you're so smart, 10% will be plenty. And if you're what I believe, that you're unlikely to outperform like everyone else is, then you'll be glad you only did 10%.
Yeah, and I think Robert's counter argument was the fact that, I mean, I don't know him well, but it seems like he's done pretty well for himself. Kudos to him, but he pretty much said, I know more about most people, and I think I could do better with your money than the average person. And maybe there's something inside of that, but you guys had a very tasteful disagreement on this, and you kind of pretty much just countered and like just that line of thinking or that logic. You can't have the information in the future. So yes, of course, if you knew exactly what these companies were going to do and where their price, where their stock price was going to be or what the next big hit was, then everybody would do that. But nobody knows that, which is, once again, why you should just probably hold everything.
Yeah, he's saying he knows more than the average person, which I agree with. And he might even know more than the good investor, which I agree with. But you're not competing against the average person. You're not competing against a good investor. You're competing against the sum total of human knowledge, which nobody knows more than, right? But I will say, like, it's not like he wants to go left, I want to go right. It's like I'm going north and he's going north, northeast or something like that. So we're not really that far off, and we're both going in the right direction. And so I think it's more of like an academic disagreement than something that's going to like one person's going to win and one person's going to lose or something. But yeah, I still think I'm more right, but we're both going to do great, so it doesn't matter.
We'll let you take that victory for now. Kind of looking back, whenever I first started in my personal finance journey, similar to you, grew up in a very frugal household. Money was kind of always the response or reasoning behind why we couldn't have something. It wasn't all bad. It was also very good. My parents were very resourceful and they had side hustles. And I think that was very important skill sets for kind of teeing up my future success in personal finance. But I really never got taught about investing. And I remember that I kind of knew it was important. My dad always preached investing into your 401k, and I went ahead and I made my match. But then I knew I should be doing more to kind of accelerate my future financial resources. And I remember getting a call from a friend, and he said, hey, can I introduce you to my financial advisor? He's looking for some new clients. I know you're really interested in personal finance and growing your wealth. So of course I got introduced to this guy, and he works for a company that I would assume most people would know. I went in there probably 22, 23, and...
Can I guess? I have two guesses.
Go ahead.
I bet it either rhymes with Borthwestern Schmutual or Schmedward's Bones.
Yeah, I think you probably were right from the very first guess.
Okay.
But yes, it was even someone that looking back on my 20-year-old self there, I probably knew more about personal finance and investing than most of my friends. But I also look back and realize how innocent I was and how unaware I was and how investing worked. And it was kind of a bummer. But I ended up working with him for 2 years. Of course, I bought a life insurance policy, and after untangling that mess, I think I got about $700 back after investing something like $13,000
Can't
into
lose money.
that product. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a shame, but there is a lot of predatoriness in this space. And I know that's kind of why you're really excited about Nectarine. Do you mind kind of sharing a little bit more about the business model and how that prevents people from the slippery slope that I just presented?
Oh my God, do get me started because I love ranting about this. The world of financial advisors is crazy. And let's start with the fact that the word financial advisor is not regulated. Anyone can call themselves a financial advisor.
Which is stupid. They need to put some regulations around that word. That is, I don't know, would it help anything? Probably not, but yeah.
I mean,
we can get on the fiduciary conversation too, but
even that word,
right.
the word financial advisor is not regulated. So anyone can call themselves a financial advisor. There are laws on who can give investment advice. That's kind of the big line in the sand. You can't give investment advice. But so what happened to you is insurance salesmen have learned this one weird trick of insurance sales, which is they can call themselves a financial advisor. And then, young, unsuspecting wealth builders, workers, investors see a financial advisor working for a big financial looking firm. They walk in, they have questions like, okay, yeah, I'm, like you said, 401k, I want to extend my wealth. This world of finance is big and confusing. Can you please put a flashlight on which way I should go? And they listen carefully and they're like, after careful consideration, I am going to suggest you buy the thing that earns me the highest commission, which is these permanent life insurance policies. And it's just so sick that a young person looking for good advice is basically getting scammed. And what you just described is horrific. You spent $13,000 to get $12,000. You basically had $12,700 stolen from you. Worse than that, you probably could have increased, that 13,000 would have become, over those 2 years, would become maybe 15,000 or something like that with an actual investment that goes up in value. And so it's just this scam happening before our eyes because these insurance salesmen are calling themselves financial advisors and selling this crappy product. And, you did the right thing. Unfortunately, the best thing at that point was to cut your losses. Had you stayed with it for another 30 years, you would have eventually acquired some cash value. You would have increased past your original $13,000. But you did the right thing by cutting your losses and then going the better route from there forward. So basically, the world of financial advisors is crazy. There's these insurance salesmen basically impersonating financial advisors. Then there's actual investment advisors who sell investment products like mutual funds and things like that. But a lot of them earn commissions. And so it's got the exact same, this exact same massive conflict of interest, which is, I'm going to suggest things to you that earn me more commission, which is not in the interest of the investor, right? So they're giving you advice, but it's not in your interest, it's in their interest. It's crazy, right? And then there's a third business model where instead of it's called fee only, which is better than the other two, but they then charge a percent of assets under management, which basically you give them all of your money, they do the investment management for you, and then they charge 1% or so a year. Can be more, sometimes there's monthly fees on top of that, whatever. That's better because then at least they're not, usually what they're doing with your money is good, but there's some big problems with it, which is one, there's often huge minimums. You need $250,000 or $500,000 before they'll even talk to you. Two, that 1% fee sounds small, but actually compounds to up to half of your money over time. Three, that also introduces some weird conflicts of interest where they don't really care about maximizing interest. They care about not losing your business. And so they might be making different decisions with your portfolio than you do. And there's always this underlying problem with any financial advice, which is no one's going to ever care about your money like you do. And so I've always given the advice, you need to learn this stuff a little bit on your own. You can never just go to any human other than maybe short of your parents or something, but very few humans on the face of the planet will truly go to bat for you. So that you need to always kind of be educated on your own. But those three business models, as this just described, the insurance salesman, impersonating financial advisors, the commissioned advisors, and the assets under management advisors, I don't like any of those models. There's a better model, which is basically flat fee, also called advice only, also called hourly, where you basically pay the advisor directly, like you give them money instead of this like this weird they get paid behind the scenes thing, and then they just tell you what to do. And it's like such a simple model. And so when I give this rant, people often have asked me like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. That's what I want. Yeah, you just pay them and then they don't have this weird conflict of interest. Where do I find one of those advisors? And my answer is always, I don't know. They're really hard to find and they're often in high demand and long wait times or whatever. So we started a company. It's called Nectarine. And it's basically a marketplace for flat fee advice only financial advisors. You can see all their prices listed right there. You can see their availability. You can click book now and check out and choose your time and pay with a credit card. And then the advisor will just get on a Zoom call with you, look at your Vanguard or your Fidelity or your Schwab or whatever portfolio with whatever brokerage you use, give you actual advice, write like a wrap-up email with notes with like actionable to-do items. And the experience almost everyone has on one of these calls is like, oh my God, like the clouds are parting when you talk to a financial professional who's not trying to sell you something. Suddenly the experience is like night and day. It's like, you know, whenever you walk out of the Northwestern Mutual office and they try to push a permanent life insurance policy on you, you're like, that didn't feel exactly right for some reason. I kind of feel like I need to take a shower to get the slime off me. But he was the expert. But when you walk out of a Nectarine meeting, it's like, oh my, okay, wow. They actually are wanting, like what they said made really sense because they're answering my questions and giving me good advice and pointing out things I know. And so that's why we did it. I know, sorry for the long rant, but I really love this stuff. And it's at hellonectarine.com. Thanks for the plug.
And I remember asking questions about the life insurance policy. I think I was smart enough to know, like, you need to be asking questions and you need to understand this. But some of these insurance salesmen are so good at smoke screening, and you can only ask, can you explain that? Or what do you mean by that? Or how does this work? So many times before you kind of have to pull the trigger and either trust this person, which you think was really behind you. And they did a good job. They like had a couple early wins. I didn't know what mutual fund to pick in my 401k. So they gave me some guidance on that. Although I would love to go back and maybe look at that decision and see if that was probably the right decision or not. And then they told me how to set up an IRA, and then of course actually just did it for me and then put me into a fund that has 1.6% expense ratio. Yep. But that's besides the point. At least they got me moving and did a couple of the structural things, and that made me kind of feel like they had my interest. And then sure enough, it was like meeting 4. That is the light. Hey, doing this with the IRA, go ahead and make the match at the 401k, but you're gonna need some liquid money. Like you're gonna have to like start thinking a little bit more. Like you're doing great, and Justin, you're gonna have a lot of options and opportunities. You don't want to wait till 60 to have access to any of your money. Boom, bang, here's this life insurance policy that solves all of my issues. Yeah,
and it's such a slick sales pitch, and like you said, so good, and like you try to pin them here and they move, then you try to pin them here and they move back there, and like, but it's all a lie, like it's all a lie. And it's all, and like the best lies have these like hints of truth, like, oh, you don't want your money. Like I actually sat through one of these sales pitches too, and the guy's like, oh, you don't want your money in money jail, and like they have all these answers and all these pitches, and it's just like, it just like makes my blood boil because like I'm a 44-year-old rich person who like does this for a living, and so I just have like a really deep knowledge compared to most people. Not compared to everyone. There's some people who make me look like an idiot, but like,
sure.
But to your average 24-year-old teacher who's walking in and being like, okay, that sounds good. Like they're just getting ripped off. It's just a scam in broad daylight. Everyone's like, they signed the contract. We're all following the rules of the insurance industry. And like all we can do is people like you and me and speak the truth and hope that the education finds the people who need to hear it.
On one hand, it was definitely one of my worst financial blunders that I've had up until now. But on the other hand, it was one of my best decisions because, as I was mentioning, it did jumpstart me and get me going. And rather than not investing in my 401k, they, with their limited certainty, kind of said, pick this one, you're going to be fine, go ahead. And that actually ended up being a great decision. They did help me set up an IRA. They plugged me into this product, which was also a really good problem to have too, because of course, like a year later where I'm like, I need to consume more about personal finance. I want to take more ownership of this. I was hearing this book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. I picked that book up, not really wanting to necessarily learn about the horrors or hatreds of financial advisors, but I got to that financial advisors. I need to air quote that. I got to that section about life insurance and about these insurance salesmen. And immediately after I finished that, I was like, holy cow. I did exactly what he's mentioning in this book. I need to get out of this ASAP. And I just went on a flurry of education over the next month before I eventually fired my advisor and moved it into DIY and self-managed. And once again, I don't know if I would have gotten there if they didn't sell me this life insurance policy, because I realized they didn't have my best interest at all after kind of looking through and Ramit being like, are you single? Are you in your 20s? Do you have any of these very, very unique situations? Well, then you got sold a piece of shit. And I was like, dang, I need to get out of this as fast as I can.
Yep. I love that. I mean, good for you, but man, it's crazy how we live in this little bubble. I just listened to your episode from FinCon, and like we're in this little FinCon bubble, and we all got together in a hotel. Like we took up half of one hotel in Atlanta, and we all know, but then like the long arms of the octopus of the traditional financial machine is still just out there like, hey, my brother-in-law's friend, he's a good guy. He's looking for new clients. You should go talk to him. Like it's crazy how that type of, just word of mouth selling or direct selling or whatever is still, even though it's, like you said, it's right there. It's a chapter in the book. I will teach you to be rich in black and white. As is it in an Instagram post on my page, as it is on a podcast episode. You're like, we're all saying it, but not people. People don't learn about this stuff. It's tough,
and it sucks because it is the people that it would probably devastate the most. I mean, I always think I was bound to figure out that the life insurance product was a bad product. I'm glad I figured it out 2 years in and not 20 years in. But some people are putting all of their faith behind an advisor for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And they're not as necessarily resourceful as the FIRE community. I think it's pretty safe to say that most FIRE people, if their bank accounts went to zero, would probably be able to regrow their wealth even at a faster clip, because once again, they are typically pretty resourceful whenever it comes to financial knowledge and entrepreneurship, or at least have high-end demand skills in the labor force. And it's these people that are, working at manufacturing plants or teachers or et cetera, that are putting all their faith in there, and they know if they just do their 40 years and continue to trust this person, then they're going to be okay, and their 60-year-old self plus won't have to worry about finances. Jeremy, let's wrap things up here. People can go to hellonectarine.com to book an appointment. Is there use cases for people that are nearing FIRE? Do you see people picking up calls and asking for consultation that are in this kind of demographic of people?
Yeah, I think it's actually probably one of the most common, because it's people, there's kind of like two groups of people. One is just like, I need an hour with someone who isn't trying to sell me something, who knows what they're talking about. Be like, kind of the first few questions you had when you walked in, you're like, which 401k thing should I choose? Like, what's the deal with the IRA? It's like, okay, boom, set you up. But then there's kind of people on like kind of approaching retirement, which have like more complex questions like, can I retire soon? Or what would be the impact of having a kid? And for sure, both of those are really common scenarios, and our advisors are like kind of really good FIRE-focused advisors. It definitely, I always say, no one's gonna care about your money like you ever, even our advisors. Like, you need to be in charge of your money, but having an expert opinion is gonna arm you to do that even better in certain situations, right? So yeah, I think if you're someone who wants to talk to a financial advisor and likes the idea of not having their hands in your pockets or whatever, I think Nectarine's a great option.
Sweet. Let's wrap things up. Jeremy, final question for you. If you had the opportunity to teach a 16-week class to a group of graduating college seniors on a topic that isn't normally covered in the classroom, what would you teach and how would you teach it?
I mean, am I allowed to say personal finance? Like,
I think you are. I think you are.
Here?
Anything outside that bucket, or should we just double down on the personal finance? And I guess you've already done it through the course.
I'd probably be personal finance. I think maybe second might be like entrepreneurship. I do think that like we do train, like our whole education system is like, teacher says do this, I do this. Teacher says do this, I do this. Yet like the leaders of industry out there are the people who tell people what to do and think of the ideas. And so I do think that we kind of teach people to be employees, and it'd be nice to teach people to be founders. I'm painting with a broad brush. Like I know there's teachers out there being like, hey, I do that, and which is great. So thank you. But that's something that I could maybe instill in people, because I've spent my life trying to, and it didn't come naturally to me too. I always thought that I was like, all right, I'll do what you say kind of guy. And now I find myself being like, all right, I guess I'm a founder kind of guy. So yeah, I think that would be a really cool course for everyone to take, just to like, whether you are going to try to be a tech founder and get venture capital and become a big company, or you're going to start a side hustle and, do things on the nights and weekends and suddenly it becomes your main hustle. Like, I think either way, or like maybe you're just a dude in a rural town and want to start a trucking company or start a plumbing company. Like, if you start a plumbing company, you can easily become a millionaire. If you are a plumber, you can for sure, but it's gonna be based on the long tail investing. Plumbing is probably a great industry to get into because plumbers make a ton of money.
They do. Well, once again, this is my friend Jeremy Schneider over at Personal Finance Club and co-founder of Nectarine, that you can go check out, hellonectarine.com. Jeremy, thanks so much for spending some time with me today.
Thank you so much, Justin. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the episode. As always, I appreciate your kind words. If you want to leave us a rating and review on your podcast player right now, that would absolutely make my day. If you want to find episode show notes, our blog, and other great resources, head over to tsirpodcast.com. If you have follow-up questions, an idea for a future episode, or just want to say hi, we have a contact form on our website, and those messages go straight into my inbox, and I promise you, I will reply. But all right, guys, I really appreciate you tuning in. I love you all, and you're not alone. Let's keep making it through our struggles together.